Welcome to the Intellectual Cage Match Podcast, dissecting culture from the only BS worth listening to, hosted by Brian and Steven from outside the cave. Welcome to Intellectual Cage Match. We are episode 2 and due. I'm Steve.
I'm Brian.
Brian, the only BS worth listening to.
Yeah.
Today we're going to talk about minimum wage, minimum thinking. Brian, why don't you kick us off and talk a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah, just segueing nicely from our mission on the Intellectual Cage Match is to explore ideas, because ideas rule the world, and good ideas lead to good institutions, lead to good outcomes. Yep. Bad ideas lead to bad institutions, lead to bad outcomes. And so what we want to do is just discuss today, is the minimum wage a good idea or a bad idea? It's a good idea, I'm all for it. Bad idea, probably ought to push it away. So that's what we'll talk about today.
So yeah, at work we talk a lot about if you want to change culture, you have to change behavior. And if you want to change behavior, you have to change the way people think.
You have to change their story about themselves.
Yeah. And so this kind of applies not only to the micro level, it actually applies to the macro level. So let's talk a little bit about it.
All right. This idea was sort of spurred by a conversation I had, 11 years ago. I was in Waukegan in a hospital, and one of my patients, the minimum wage argument is eternal. It's been around for a long, long time.
Okay.
And she was for it. And I was only removed from graduate school in economics maybe 10 years, so I thought I had something funny, something good to say. And so I asked her.
Did you?
No, not at all. Absolutely worthless, as most of the things that I pontificate on. But anyway, I asked her, just to be clear, I said, do you know what the minimum wage is? Do you know what the wage is? And she said, no. And I said, well, it's the price of labor. Mm-hmm. And so I asked her, I said, so let's assume that the price of milk went up 2 times. I said, would you personally buy more milk or less milk? She goes, I'd buy less. I go, well, there you go. And so...
Did she connect the dots?
Yeah, she did, actually. I don't know if that changed.
Anyone can collect the dots, but everybody can connect the dots.
This is what the intellectual podcast, or this intellectual cage match is about. We always want to come with a smile, and kindness first. And she knew me. She was my patient. She trusted me. And so my whole point is that I truly believe that people that are, the majority, I should say, that are for the minimum wage are good, decent people.
Okay.
And they want to do good, decent things. Okay. And they want a good outcome. The problem not is in their intentions, is what we seek to look here at the Intellectual Cage Match is the idea good? Because if you have good people promoting bad ideas, you get a bad outcome. Mm-hmm. And so all we are here to do is offer an alternative idea, proposition. So
or a very old idea that no one
there's nothing new under the sun. Yeah, there's nothing new under the sun.
So because I think you're going to take a little trip back in time now and talk a little bit about the fundamentals of minimum wage and why it doesn't work.
Yeah, where I want to start with is something that Thomas Sowell, what he quoted in his book Basic Economics. Okay. Praise be he.
I got that book upstairs on my shelf.
Yeah, I know you do. Yeah. It's a primer. It's a primer.
It is. It's what's us people.
He wrote that while critics of various programs often point out unintended consequences that did more harm than good, many of these consequences were predictable. Remember the price of milk? Mm-hmm. We know that if it goes up, we're going to buy less. So these consequences were predictable from the outset if people had looked at the incentives created rather than the goals proclaimed. Yep. So intentions were noble, but the consequences were just the exact opposite of what people desired. So where I want to start today is mention the first law of demand. Now this comes from my textbook called Universal Economics. Great textbook, by the way.
Okay.
And you'll see why I'm going to read this dry stuff to you in just a moment. So the first law...
Just nudge me if I fall asleep.
Yeah, I will. I'll give you an open-handed slap. I'll give you a Mr. Geyer slap on the ear. So
let me get my D on first.
Yeah. So first law of demand states that a sufficiently higher price will decrease the quantity demanded. So when we're talking about the minimum wage, what that's saying is that when we increase through fiat, through government control, the price of labor, which is the wage, Well, there's not going to be as much demanded, just like there's not going to be as much, when they raise the gas tax, as much gas is demanded.
Yeah. So what you're basically saying is that the very thing that people think they're trying to help is really going to hurt them. That's really what this is about.
That's what this is all about.
And if someone really cared about the little people or the oppressed people, and maybe I'd challenge one adjective you said a noble thought. I think it's an emotional thought.
Yeah,
I don't think it's noble, because to me noble strikes of benevolent. It thinks of the idea that you really do not only care, but you literally want to do everything in their best interest. And I guess I'll just say I'm more of the, maybe I'm just jaded in my old age. I'm more of the I am the more case of I think people really want power more than they really want to help people. Even when they start out wanting, altruistically, they always end up in that same place of, if they pander, if they appeal to your emotions, if they appeal to a promised outcome that is literally impossible based on the program that was suggested, that's how they get elected.
I agree, but we differentiate between demagogues and the masses. And the masses can still be noble, because the idea promoted by the demagogues is maybe noble, is good.
So we're noble savages then.
Yeah, pretty much. Harkening back to Hobbes. Yeah, harkening back to Hobbes.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast.
The part that bothers me is that I took economics, micro and macro in college, and it was boring as all get out.
Did you get an A?
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
But that's because you just memorize it and you put it on the test. But the part that was just terrible about that class over many classes is that one of the professors wasn't exactly conservative, and B is they don't bring real life examples into that.
That's
this
what
is
this
a
is
great
about.
example to just demonstrate why minimum wage cannot work.
No.
And it ultimately leads to more unemployment, higher prices, and really, I think you want to talk maybe on a moral ground here a little bit about what it also does. What is the moral implications of people demanding minimum wages from the government?
In what way?
Well,
point me in the direction, Steve.
You talked earlier. We were talking about this, and you mentioned, that it's coercion.
I'll get to that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I jumping ahead?
Yeah, you're.
We only have 20 minutes. Brian.
What? People want to hear more of me. I'm just telling you. I can feel it.
Well, they want to see you more.
I'm sure that's what it is.
You are the beauty, and I'm
the beast.
I'm the beast.
Yeah. So no, where I want to go back with is, remember, the law of demand states simply that when a sufficiently higher price will decrease the quantity demanded. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's the definition. First law of demand. Got it? Okay. So now let's go back to our wrestling analogy.
Oh.
Got it? We got it? We can't forget our wrestling, intellectual cage match. Steve, tell me what happens to the bad guy in the wrestling ring when he brings a foreign object into the ring. What eventually happens?
I'm going to take a wild guess.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, wild guess is that eventually the other guy is going to take that object
the good guy
and use it against him.
Yes, he is. That's what's going to happen.
And there you go.
So, segue now into, when we speak about climate change, hot topic today, so we're dating the podcast.
Don't go there. YouTube's going to demonetize us.
Oh,
shit. Okay.
Are you serious?
Yeah, that's all right.
Fascist. now we're going. There we go.
Fascist.
So,
yes.
Fascist.
Yes,
so
fascist.
no. What happens is that people that promote global warming and that whole zeitgeist, okay, they shut down contrary opinions by saying the science is settled. Got it? So I wanted to establish that.
Mm-hmm. The science is settled, right?
Okay, see that now. What I'm going to do now is use the foreign object against them. See the analogy? See, that was good. That was good. But let me tell you this then. So, a majority of professional economists surveyed in Britain, Germany, Canada, Switzerland, and the United States. And in the United States, 90% of the economists surveyed. Here's what they had to say.
What about China?
That's authoritarian. Do they have economists there? If you agree, yes.
Yes.
If no, we shoot you. Yes. So agreed that the minimum wage. Now listen to this. Yeah. So we got our consensus. Remember, big word, consensus among the left. Minimum wage laws increase unemployment among low-skilled workers. Mm-hmm. There's your consensus. So the science is settled in terms of minimum wage. So if we're looking to increase employment among the poor, the consensus of the expert says if you raise the minimum wage, you actually hurt the poor. So let me follow up with this. In country after country around the world, those whose employment prospects are reduced the most by minimum wage laws are those who are younger, less experienced, members of a minority group, and the less skilled. So we're actually, by raising, by fiat, the minimum wage, we're hurting the people that we actually want to help.
Yeah, and I think
That's the conclusion.
easy appeal of that, though, is that when a person is in that income class and they see their paycheck go up $2 or $1.50 or whatever it is, they think they're getting ahead. And that's the sad part about this whole thing, because they're actually not. Because then their rent goes up, the cost of goods go up, and by the way, 1920, okay? If you wanted to go buy a really nice suit, okay, 1920, you want to go buy a really nice suit, do you know what it cost?
No.
It cost 1 troy ounce of gold. Guess what happens today if you walk Michigan Avenue in Chicago?
Yeah.
Want to buy a nice suit, tailored suit. Guess how much it's going to cost you?
I don't know.
1 troy ounce of gold.
Oh, so absolute versus relative. So pretty much the same stuff.
So the fiat money, it cost you back then, it cost you around $8 to get a suit back then. Today it costs you about $1,800 to get a suit of the same quality, hand-tailored suit. The cost of the money is meaningless. The product didn't go up in price. Our economy, our money is devalued.
Yeah.
And so the point is, when you put that in context of minimum wage, they could give you $1 million minimum wage.
And if everything goes up.
And this is the where I like to do, when I do my logic exercise, I take everything to the extreme, because that starts poking holes in about everything we take to the extreme. So to your point, you do a minimum wage, okay, instead of everybody getting $10 an hour, let's make it $1,000 an hour. What is going to happen? Everything is going to go up and eventually settle right back where it is.
Yeah.
And this is the problem with I'll just say the science is settled. We need to call Paul Krugman though and let him know that he's
Psycho alert.
He's an outcast.
Psycho alert.
And maybe Robert Reich.
Yeah, psycho alert.
Those guys,
Krugman.
you know.
He won the Nobel Prize.
I know.
Low bar.
Oh.
Low bar.
Well, I'm not going to go there because
bar.
there's a few people won that prize that are
Yeah.
really low bar that didn't even do anything to win it.
But Hayek did, and so did Friedman, Milton Friedman.
Yeah.
Thomas Sowell ought to get it. Write him in.
He should.
He should.
He should. No,
Yeah.
the great economists put things always into context of what it means to human beings. And what I think happens a lot is
I agree with that.
is that
right there.
bad economists start with human beings and make economics fit that, where great economists start with economics and see what the real implication on human beings, what it really is. And I think that's what makes Thomas so great. And I follow him on Twitter. I probably should get it out and see what he's saying today, because maybe he's talking about minimum wage.
Well, yeah, great minds think alike. So if I'm thinking about it, he's thinking about it.
I'll look it up while we go to the next section. But I did skip ahead on you, didn't I?
Yeah, you did. Well, what I want to talk about, what Thomas Sowell says is that he's, on numerous occasions, he said the effective minimum wage is zero. And what he meant by that is if we increase the minimum wage, unemployment will increase. So your effective minimum wage, well, it's about zero. But the only way, and so philosophically what you were getting at, how I look at it, the minimum wage, Steve, is simply this, is that a turning point in human history occurred when we sort of made the philosophical step where we said no man can be the ends to another man's means. We can't do that. In other words, no man can be a man's needs, a tool for another man, that each person is an individual with liberty and freedom.
Well, let's just stop there for a second, because I know this is going to get your blood pressure up. I got the monitor right over there if you want to check it.
Yeah.
I watched most of the Democratic debate yesterday.
Psycho.
Yeah,
you know what a masochist is, Steve?
I know.
One who's kind to a sadist.
Yep. And
I
so
didn't.
I am a sadomasochist.
Yeah, pretty much, because you're a self.
Self-loathing. I must be self-loathing. So I watched it, and the thing that was stood out in all that was the fact that, there's three things that stood out to me in this. One is obviously they're always blaming someone else for something. Those greedy this, those greedy that. It was first the oil companies, climate change. And then it was all about the greedy corporations and minimum wage. And then it was all about the greedy pharmaceutical companies on the cost of medicine. And so they have to have their straw man. They have to burn their straw man. And then the second thing is that they spend all their time appealing to emotion. And what you were just talking about made me think about this, that their entire spiel is to make you feel like you can't live a productive life without them.
Yeah.
That you're not going to.
I see. Yeah, exactly.
You're not going to be able to fulfill all your goals in life without Big Brother, without the government ruling you. And then the third thing about that I saw last
That's Middle Ages thinking, just so everybody knows.
Well, it is.
What does the Lord say?
Yeah.
And I don't mean Lord. I mean the Lord of the Manor.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's exactly right.
But the third
Thought
thing
we got rid of that.
is that it was the pure narcissism of a person thinking that they've got all the answers.
Yeah, that's so new.
Yeah, it drives me crazy. So anyway, I wanted just to bring that up because I think what you're talking about really falls right into kind of the pandering and the type of things that go on there with the fact that all the promises they're making ultimately are going to hurt the very people.
Yeah, that's the
But it
whole
is a
idea.
vicious cycle because the very people that it hurts are the very people that are going to vote for them.
Yeah.
And that's sad.
Yeah. You have a demagogue and speaking about bad ideas, making them sound good.
Yep.
And I have a, sadly, reality is not optional. And the truth of the matter is that the minimum wage causes unemployment, not amongst the well-to-do, the educated,
Right.
but among those least of us. And I would be all for the minimum wage.
Right.
I would be all for it if it helped the people that we want to help. So I'm not anti-minimum wage. But I want to leave sort of the minimum wage and talk more about the philosophy behind it and why I oppose it. And it's simply this. To institute a minimum wage would require government coercion. The government would have to, say, you're going to now pay this. So let's say it's $15 an hour.
Okay.
So what you're telling the employer is that he is no longer in control of his life, at least that aspect of it.
Okay.
So philosophically, all I want people to answer is this question. What level of coercion are you comfortable with in your life? Because if we institute coercion in say, the minimum wage, as you can now see, it's never going to stop. There will always be a clamor, and we're seeing that now with universal basic income. There's always going to be so it's almost...
But it buys votes is what it does.
Yeah, it buys votes.
So think about all the things that offer economic, something to someone's pocketbook in the short term is what buys votes.
Yeah.
And I just have to do this because I just looked at Thomas Sowell's last tweet. It was actually from 9 hours ago, so we actually get one by the time we're done with our podcast.
Yeah.
Because he does it once a day, basically, maybe twice. And this is interesting.
Prolific.
As long as millions of Americans vote on the basis of who gives them free stuff.
Yeah. Or the idea of free stuff, actually.
Look for their freedom and all our freedom to be eroded away bit by bit.
Yeah.
So coercion.
Yeah, well, now let's go back to the employer. The minimum wage rises to $15 an hour. So here's just a scenario how coercion increases geometrically. Okay? So the employer now has to pay $15 for any employee, new employee. Any time that the price goes up, quantity demanded decreases. That's a law of demand. Okay, so the employer maybe before the minimum wage went to say $15 an hour, he hired a guy with experience, paid him $10 an hour, but then hired a guy right out of high school, $5 an hour, $5 an hour to sweep his floors, and to start looking at the business and interacting with the employees, showing up on time, getting those basic skills. So he hired two people for $15 an hour. Now he's mandated, coerced into paying $15. Yep. So he now has to make his choice because of government fiat based on a different standard. So now he says, oh, well, I can't hire two people. I can only hire one. So now he's faced with a guy with experience in his line of work that would probably be a benefit greater than $10 to his business, and a guy just out of high school who has a lot of wants to learn, but really can't add much than sweeping the floors, right?
Right.
So what he does is he hires a $15 guy. He hires the guy with more experience, $15 an hour. Okay. So now the unemployed young guy is unemployed, right? But now watch what happens. Here's how government coercion grows exponentially. So now 5 years later, people in power take a look at the results of the minimum wage. Right. And they say that the people that we wanted to be hired, well, hell, they weren't hired. Look at that poor young college, high school. He didn't get a job then, and he didn't get the ability to build the skills, so he's not employed now. So instead of admitting that their policies were wrong, they tightened the screws by increasing the minimum wage again, because they can't take a step out and admit that the idea, the initial idea that they bought into was wrong. And because the idea was wrong, the institutions were wrong, thus the outcome. So they doubled down on coercion.
So isn't this really just another stepping in the direction of socialism?
Absolutely.
I mean, let's. So, I'm glad you told that story, because I've got another story to tell.
Well, that's what all life's about.
And
this is a campfire back 200,000 BC.
And my story is from Matthew 21 through 16. And it's actually the parable of the workers in the vineyard. So a landowner goes out to the market and he finds some people that looking for work. And he says, I'll pay you a denarius if you come work in my field for the day. And they agree. And then at noon he goes back and he gets some more people. And he brings them back to the vineyard to work. And at about 4 o'clock, last few hours of the day, he had to find some more people because he wanted to get all the work done. And at the end of the day, he paid them all a denarius. And the people that he hired in the morning were all upset with him and said, essentially, this is unfair. I'm getting paid the same amount these other people are. And he said, did you not agree to work for a denarius? And if I'm generous to give the other people some money, a full day's wage for 3 hours work, what is it of you? And the whole point of this is the government really thinks that they're the arbitrator of what's all fair.
And I'm sorry, the government is made up of what?
Yeah, people.
People, and people are naturally good.
Sinners,
yeah, no, actually we're fallen.
Oh, yeah, that's it. And that's part of the issue. And that, well, no, here's the thing. You actually a leftist, and you get them alone, you really talk to them, they actually admit that not all people are all good, but they are.
Well, yeah.
It's like what?
Yeah.
What? How does that make sense?
I know.
No, people are flawed. We are fallen. But the fact is that if someone wants to be generous with one group of people in terms of working, less hours than other people, the only thing the government needs to be involved in, if there was a discrimination based solely on a something that is obvious, like race, color, religion.
Government is there to enforce the rules of the game.
That's exactly. Well, they unfortunately they set up the rules of the game, and that's the sad part.
Yeah.
And to your point, going all the way back to the beginning, you talked about coercion, or not the beginning, but the beginning of this conversation in this part, is that unfortunately the governments by nature coerce. By nature.
They have a monopoly on violence.
They do. They have a monopoly. And so they pass, laws to change our constitution, whether it's how senators are being elected, the income tax, prohibition. These aren't things that were neither democratic, which I'm not a big fan of, but that's another topic, nor were they, to me, ethical or moral. Because ultimately, when people get together and decide on a form of government, and they all say, this is what we want to do, to suddenly change those things is coercion. So we're now talking about minimum wage. The problem with American society is we're used to coercion and we accept it. That is our problem. So I'm going to give you an example. It's not on minimum wage, but it's relevant. 12 years ago, they started putting x-ray machines into all the airports, and they started patting people down. And they wouldn't profile anybody. They would go usually after people who look like me because they wanted to feel like they're virtue signaling that everybody's getting done. And I was really upset. And I said, I'm going to stop flying. Because no one has a right to basically look under my garments that way and then to pat me down and grab my because they think I'm a threat.
Yeah.
And that's crap, because I've been flying for years, frequent flyer, and suddenly for years I'm going through a metal detector and then asking to empty out my pockets with a wand. And that was okay for 20 years almost. And then all of a sudden I had to go through an x-ray machine, and then I had to be patted down. It's a complete invasion of my privacy, of who I am. I am not a threat. And they know I'm not a threat. They know it. Why? Because I'm frequent flyer with that airline. They know I've been a good customer. I've never been violent. I have no record. They have all this information because you have a driver's license every time you get a ticket, and now it's passport or driver's license. So they know you. There's watch lists there. There always has been. Mm-hmm. So the fact is that it pisses me off because I actually asked a colleague of mine that I work with. I said, Audie, where's the line at?
Well, that's it. That's what level of coercion are you satisfied with?
And you know what he said?
Are you comfortable with?
He said, I don't know.
There's not. There's not. That's the whole point. Because just go back to Stalinist Russia.
Yep.
You know what Stalin said. He said, you know, the death of one is a tragedy. The death of a million is a statistic.
That's exactly right.
But here's what I want to end. So when I'm talking about the minimum wage, I'm not really talking about the minimum wage.
What?
No. The existential question becomes, who are you trying to help? And are the policies and the ideas that you advocate for actually helping those who you are trying to help?
Okay.
If not, then the idea is bad. And the minimum wage is a bad idea for the exact reason that the people that we're trying to help are not getting helped. So
How do we change that?
Fundamentally, the government needs to get out of setting the minimum wage. And
Which they're not.
which they're not. But through, again, through podcasts like this, people spreading the alternative idea. So getting the idea out there that we don't need to do that. My son is a perfect example. He just started working, and he's paid far below $15 an hour. But in a year, he got a pretty substantial increase in his wage. Why? He proved himself, developed skills, moved up the job ladder. I wouldn't want him paid $15. He wasn't worth. He's my kid, and he wasn't worth $15 an hour.
Yeah.
Well, unless the job was watching TV and using ranch dressing like it's a fourth food group. Then, okay, yeah, he might be worth $15 there. Sorry about that, Tristan. Had to get that in there. So, Steve, I got to get out of here.
Okay. You want to tag off or what?
Well, yeah, it's leg day tomorrow, so I got to go. It's leg day. Got to get out of here. It's leg day. So,
all right.
So that's in conclusion, the minimum wage is the intentions might be good. The idea is flawed. If the idea is flawed, the institutions are flawed. If the institutions are flawed, the outcome's bad. So I think we pretty much segued really nice from the first podcast into the second. But you'll be the judge out there. Judge well.
And I guess that concludes our intellectual cage match for today. And so if you like this video, please check the little thumbs up at the bottom. Please subscribe. And we're going to get a Patreon account up so you can also donate if you'd like this and help us pay for this really expensive equipment we've got.
Oh my gosh, you can't believe it.
So anyway, I'm Steve. This is Brian.
Hi guys.
See ya.